So there's something else that governs all of the action and lack of action in our world at a macrocosm level and a microcosm level, okay? And what I'm referring to are these principles of natural law. I'm not going to spend ages on this, and these do run fairly deep, but it's important to have a bit of an understanding of these because these are always playing out, and especially in your business. If you can be aware of this, it will change things dramatically. And for some, this might seem a little bit like a little bit far-fetched, but just stay with me because you'll see how this all fits together soon. Ultimately, these principles that I'm about to speak of, essentially these are what are happening, like I said, at a macrocosm level and a microcosm level. These principles govern all of the universe, and once we have an understanding of them, we can actually work with them, okay? So we need to understand that as human beings, we are conscious beings. We are some of the most conscious beings on earth. There's a big difference between what's going on in our brain and consciousness itself. The difference between a human being and, say, a dog. When a dog looks in the mirror, it sees another dog, right? When a human being looks in the mirror, it sees this individual self, perceived individual self, which is our greatest gift in this lifetime, but also it can cause a lot of problems too, right? So here's the difference. A dog's highest potentiality and lowest potentiality, it's kind of like this is the highest potentiality, a really healthy, happy dog. Yeah, lowest potentiality is probably here, okay? There's only so much that the dog can kind of reach in this lifetime. And it's not thinking about how can I create other programs to help other dogs? How can I, change global warming? How can I go to Mars? It's not thinking that. But a human being, this is what we are able to do. Remove this. And that's pretty scary. There's definitely a bottom line of potentiality too, by the way, which some people have to hit in order to start moving back up again. Sometimes to hit it a few times, but this is removed. This top line's removed. And that's the difference between a human being. So we need to look at consciousness as rather a relationship that we have where we're kind of like our brain's like an antenna and it's taking on this feedback, if you like. And ultimately, the more aware we can become, the more consciously we can make decisions, the more we can respond in life instead of react in life. So ultimately, what do we have to experience this life, this consciousness in? A body, our mind, our thoughts, and our emotions are kind of that energy, that spirit, okay? So we need to safeguard them. So consciousness essentially is the ability of a being to recognize patterns and meaning with respect to events taking place, both within oneself and the realm in which the self operates. Because if you realize at some level you're creating everything, then you can take radical responsibility that at some level you either attracted or enabled everything right now. So when things don't go to plan, at some level, if you can take on that radical feedback, I'm not saying it's necessarily 100% your fault, but what I'm saying is you need to take 100% responsibility. At some level, you either attracted or enabled it. Is it 100% that other person's fault as well? Yes, because they at some level are at play too. They attracted or enabled it. If you're playing this victim role, it's going to be extremely difficult to get ahead in life ever. You need to, at some level, realize that you are the problem, but you are the solution at the same time, which is the interesting part. So we want to make sure we're not working from this reptilian brain, which is survival mechanism. We want to make sure we're not just working from the limbic system, which is all emotion. We want to be working even beyond the prefrontal cortex, which is just all the information that we can be guided in the moment. We want to get to a place where we can have this union between masculine energy and feminine energy. So what I'm saying is you need to be able to tap into intuition to make decisions moving forward, even when you don't have all the pieces, but you also need to still be in a space where you're working on that masculine energy, which is, that discipline of doing the daily things. Because if you just sit on your hands, nothing's going to happen. But if you just keep doing the things without really zooming out and having time for stillness and reflection, and working on the business instead of in the business, then you're just going to keep getting the same results and you're going to plateau yourself. So we need to have this beautiful balance between the two. So the first universal law that I want to speak into, and it's pretty obvious really when we start looking at this concept of cause and effect, is mentalism. So the all is the mind and the universe is mental. That means you're creating everything at some level. So thoughts lead to the manifestation of things and events. Thoughts create our state of existence and the quality of the experience here on earth, and therefore be responsible Apologies, guys. We'll be back in a sec. There we go. There we go. So therefore, we need to be responsible for every experience we have here on Earth, because at some level, we are 100% creating this, okay? And therefore, we have to be responsible for everything we create by being responsible for everything that we think. Because if we are not someone who is being responsible for what we think, then we're going to start creating more shit in our life, essentially. And those of you that know or follow the studies of Joe Dispenza, he talks about this idea of even causing effect, which means the moment we have a thought and we connect an emotion to it, what essentially that does is that actually then starts to create that in our reality. So be very careful the thoughts that you have, because they are 100% getting projected out into reality. So the second law that we're going to look at today is the law of correspondence. That which is above is like to that which is below. That which is below is like to that which is above. The macrocosm, the very large in totality, and the microcosm, the very small, is ultimately just reflections of one another. We're not separate from nature. We're 100% part of it, right? The universe is holographic and is self-similar across all scales. Vibration, this is an important one. So nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. At the most fundamental level, the universe and everything which it comprises is purely vibrationary energy, manifesting itself in different ways. The universe has no solidality as such. Matter is merely just energy in motion. Now, why is that really important to understand? Because whatever you're putting out into the world, whatever you're putting out into this world is 100% coming back. And abundance is not something that you need to obtain. It's a frequency you need to get to. Because the more that you can raise your own vibration naturally, the more it comes in. Think about it. People that are at a certain higher vibration, that are not working from a lack mindset, that are working from an abundance mindset, have a different energy to them. And therefore, they create a different reality. So we need to go, how can we move into this abundance type mindset? The next law is polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has its poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. So opposites are ultimately identical in nature, but are different to a degree. So extremes meet and all paradoxes can be reconciled. And so often what we can sometimes be in a position of thinking is, okay, something happens in the business that was unexpected, and we go, oh, this is like a bad thing happening right now. Or we can go, there's a good thing happening right now. But if we can raise above this idea of good and bad, it puts us in a space where we go, this is just something that is happening in this moment right now. And it's not happening to me, it's happening for me right now. Because if you even look back at your life right now, where there were some changes that happened, and at the time you thought this is the worst thing ever happening, it ended up being one of the greatest gifts, or one of your greatest blessings, right? So what we need to do is move to this place of how can we view things as not necessarily being good or bad, but rather view things as being just events happening. And how can we reframe the way in which we look at events happening? That's really important, because if we can change the meaning, like I said before, of events as they happen, then, and we don't label them necessarily as good or bad, then it allows us to move through these events with a lot more grace. And you might be thinking, why are we doing so much of this stuff? I want to know the business stuff. This is the stuff for success in business. If you have things that pop up that are unplanned and you freak out, then everything falls over. You have to have a certain emotional mastery, a certain way of thinking, that as things change, when those challenges pop up, you are able to navigate them in a certain way. This is why we're going through these things to start off with. Now, this is probably one of the most powerful laws that we need to remember. The law of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure to the swing to the right is the measure to the swing to the left. Rhythm always compensates. So if you had a pretty shitty year last year, perfect. This year's most likely, I'm not saying necessarily, but most likely is going to be actually a really good year for you. because what happens is life is essentially like this rhythm, this pendulum, this ebbs and flows of life. What's happening is we need to have those challenging moments so that we can then grow, and then it swings back the other way. As we grow, it's these ebbs and flows of life. So when we have these challenges, instead of meeting them with, oh shit, it's all end, like this is the end, in many cases, it's actually just the beginning. It's not happening to you, it's happening for you. So if you're going through a tough period, guess what? It's not going to last forever. If you're going through a good period, this is an important thing too. Guess what? It's not going to last forever. And this is why we need to create a sustainable approach to the way we do things. And this is why it's important to create multiple streams of income, because if one part of the business starts to do this because of, lockdowns or whatever it is, or whatever's happening, global pandemics, a new technology can kill a business overnight. Those here who probably remember Video Easy and stuff, like, where are they now? Right? Gone. And soon, and this sounds crazy, but when you watch this video 5 years from now, you'll see there's driverless cars that are coming out, and soon they're going to be released, and people will be able to buy a Tesla car that is self-driving once they're safer than someone driving you around. It's been tested. Once people roll those out, you'll be able to buy a Tesla car where it's going to be an investment for you, making passive income. It's going to be dropping people off. And what's going to happen to Uber drivers? What's going to happen to cab drivers then? I'm saying this purely because technology is taking over certain jobs, certain professions, certain things that people used to exchange time for money for. So we always need to go, how can we create a business there's no such thing as a bulletproof business. Everything has the ability to have a Achilles heel, so to speak. But what you can create is a bulletproof mindset. And that is, no matter what happens, you have the resources within you. No matter what happens, you have behavioral flexibility to adapt. No matter what happens, you have this sense of certainty that you can bring to any uncertainty, right? That is the one thing you can bring to any situation. So this is a really important principle when it comes to marketing, when it comes to sales, when it comes to creating your programs, products, giving value, because cause and effect, for every cause, there's an effect. For every effect, there is a cause. Everything happens according to this law. Chance is but merely the law that is not recognized. There are so many planes of causalization, but nothing escapes this law. What that essentially means, whatever you sow, so you shall reap. Whatever you reap, so you shall sow. So what I'm trying to say in that statement is that if I'm putting a lot of good value out into the world, maybe not straight away, maybe not by the same person, but it's going to come back. The value that you put out into the world is a direct reflection of what's going to come back to you. So every time you just put value out into the world, especially if you do it from a place of not expecting anything in return, guess what? It's going to come back no matter what, eventually. But if you put out a lot of, you put a lot of suffering into the world and you're just all about take, guess what's going to happen? That's going to come back to you. So when especially you're putting stuff out on your social media, when you're marketing, when you're working with someone, don't look at what you can get, but rather what you can give. And naturally, just by doing that, the value is going to come back to you. It's a universal law. It is a universal law. If you just focus on how can I just give as much value as I can to every person I interact with, I guarantee you, your business will thrive like you've never imagined. You'll have more abundance than you could ever imagine just by focusing on this law. Focus on what I can give. Focus on putting out as much value as possible into the world without the attachment. Doesn't mean you are pushing that away of receiving, but without the attachment of receiving, and naturally you will actually receive no matter what. It's pretty interesting, but this is why I'm sharing these laws with you today. And then of course, the law of gender, which ultimately there is gender in everything. Everything has masculine and feminine principles, and gender manifests on all planes. We're looking for an equilibrium in that. The feminine is like that creative, nurturing energy. That's where we really come up with the ideas. That's where we are able to bring the creative side into the business. Yeah, that's where we bring the heart into the business. That's when we can be guided by our intuition. And then the masculine aspect is the doing, is the discipline, is the rituals, is the doing the things that need to be done. Yeah. And here's the thing, if you don't have a beautiful balance of both, usually the business is unsustainable, because if you just have heaps of potentiality, heaps of ideas, but you never do anything with them, guess what it stays as? Potentiality. You just keep doing all the things and you just burn yourself out. And generally, you won't be getting innovative, you won't be getting creative. You'll probably be more just doing the things without zooming out and looking at how you can do things better or more creatively, right? So we need to have this balance even in our business as well. And as I was speaking before, whatever thoughts we have on a regular basis, whatever emotion we attach to that, it actually projects out into the world and creates our reality. Joe Dispenza talks about this in detail. I posted a video on the group so you guys can watch this as well. If you're watching this video in our automated program, then you'll have the video available to the link so you can watch that video. But it is powerful, because when we look at this concept of causing effect, it means that by the thoughts that we have, the emotion that we attach to the thought, we're actually creating it in our reality. So in the morning, that's why morning rituals are so important. If you get up and you're like stressed, overwhelmed, thinking about all the things you're going to do for the day, and you are harboring that and thinking about all the things that are going to go wrong, you're going to probably have a pretty shit day, and your day is going to be full of anxiety and worry, because you're creating that. So this is why it's really important to have certain rituals, especially first thing in the morning, that are going to make sure that you are creating the day that you want. And our days make our weeks make our months, and our months make our life, right? So important. So important.